What's going on, you guys? It's your boy 3 Stickity Stacks in this thing, baby, representing TKOG. And today I'm gonna be going over my first ever tier list, actually using a tier maker, bruh. Yo, I've been using it on a freaking dueling book, bro. Trash. Yo. I didn't realize it was this easy, so it's kind of embarrassing that I've been using dueling book for my tier list, and I didn't know it was this easy to make a tier, like go on a tier maker. I just found this out, bro. So slap me, I'm garbage. I know. Let's get into this, yo, because this is the top 10 best archetypes post ban list. The ban list was like a slap and tickle for most people, but there's still stuff to talk about because there's things that changed that made some decks slightly worse and some decks even a lot better than they were. It takes just a little bit to make a big difference in most circumstances in the card game that we play, you guys. So if you like this kind of content, definitely consider subscribing to the channel, and if you do, click the notification bell so you don't miss a single upload. If you click my description box of every single one of my video, I always copy paste my links for you to get access to the Discord and the Patreon if you want to support your boy. Hold it down. And also, in addition to that, make sure you do drop a comment and also click that like button to support the algorithm. We eating, we feasting. So let's start, yo. What do I want to start with, bro? I do have there's like a collective kind of thing going on where like I'm gonna view one or two archetypes as one collectively because they do just too many similar things. I think the first one I want to talk about here in the top 10 per se is gonna be Eldritch and Labyrinth. Now I just feel like right now purple cards are not like, purple's just never really like the way to go for most formats. There's some formats like for example, when we were in the virtual world format, when like virtual world and Drytron were just D decks, purple cards were amazing because they did not care about VFD, and as long as you had a strike and you were nice, you didn't really care about what Drytron was doing either. So it was like safe for the most part to play purple cards. This is not one of those formats, you guys. This is one of those formats that's a little bit more fast-paced than even that one, where hand traps don't always matter and the game is not just decided and dictated based on who goes first. Contrary to what you guys may think, these decks are so powerful that they're actually able to contend with fully established boards and break them with pure engine. If you have seen Sprite go first and seen Tier go second, and absolutely, I mean, bro, tears infused with salt dripping from the pupils of that man playing Sprite thinking he was nice, bro. Your stuff is flat, bro. Your soda's flat, bro. He's not even good. It's 7-Up, bro. I saw it. I see it through in my own eyes. Let me shut up. But yeah, I do think these decks are really, really good. I think Labyrinth is better, high key. Labyrinth's cards kind of they work cohesively, so they don't really do anything by themselves. But the way the deck's designed, the way it can escalate so fast, the way it applies so much pressure, how it has so much control that it literally decides kind of the tempo of how the game's gonna go, and it snowballs. It doesn't just kind of maintain that stability and advantage that it started with like Eldritch does. It snowballs. And it gets a little too out of control. It gets to a point where you have more interruptions than your opponent has cards to actually even bait your interruptions or play into them. It gets to a point where there is no way to navigate through the board. You're just running into a brick wall, bro, that's literally on fire. So I just feel like Labyrinth is really nice. I've seen this deck break fully established Sprite, Dragon Link, and also tier boards with engine. Now Eldritch might do it and they'll be like, tribute strike, rivalry, chain, skill drain, goes in, chain, rivalry, chain, second, goes in face sanguine. You know, it's different when Labyrinth does it though. When Labyrinth does it, it's like insert dominance. I'm about to end this man's whole career, bro. When I saw Labyrinth cutting up, I was like, oh my god. Bro, I was like, oh my god. Like, bro, it made me want to drop everything I had in my hand because I seen it, bro. The last time I seen Labyrinth coming up was on DV Grinder's channel, but I seen it before. I was like, oh my god, I ain't never seen purple cards do this before. Like with Engine, bro, that man broke his whole board, took all his interruptions, face tanked them, and then had his own board made, and on the follow-up replaced literally every card he used to break the board. That man doubled his investment. That man put $1 in and got 2 back. Bro, Labyrinth is kind of nice, I'm not gonna lie. And its boss monsters are oppressive. I mean, sheesh and rice, Lord Christ. That is amazing. This deck is amazing. Thank you, Lord Jesus. This deck is amazing. Labyrinth is it, bro. I think Labyrinth could easily be like the Eldritch replacement or the new Eldritch. But I kept Eldritch in there because representation is a big deal when you're deciding whether a deck is tier 1 or not. But I think what matters more than anything is results. Results. Numbers don't lie. You can't argue with results. You could argue representation and say, oh, it's tier 1, so everybody wants to play it. You know, crackheads are follow crackheads, sheep gon' follow. Then, you know, it's stuff like that. But, bro, results, you just can't argue with them. If a deck's doing good and you see it consistently doing good, that's enough volume for the deck to speak for itself, where you don't really need to factor in anything else to decide whether or not it's good. It's good because it's good. Like, literally. But I think this is going to start off tier 2. I do believe Labyrinth is better, but I think Eldritch has had better results, and it has a more true, it's more like a tried and true and proven track record. But let's bump up to tier 1, and what I have representing Runic, I'm not even going to lie, bro, it's Mystic Mind. But it's still Runic. Hear me out. It's still Runic. I'm not discrediting the deck. I'm not that kind of guy. It's not a Mystic Mind deck. But like if you're playing pure Runic, you're either decking your opponent out and not dying, or you're like using Mystic Mind to not die and deck them out. You know what I mean? And I'm not going to lie, this is the best Mystic Mind deck right now. It's better than the Mystic Mind deck people were playing with Wabu and Wabi and like Ojama Trio and just all that trash. Because it can actually do something without crutching on Mystic Mind. Like, Runic cards are actually really good. I look at it as, like, poor man strikers. Simply because, like, it has similar tools that Striker has, but less diverse. Because Striker has everything that Runic has, but Runic doesn't have everything that Striker has. You know, and some of Runic's cards that aren't the kind of, they don't fill the roller niche that Striker cards can. They also don't really fill a roller niche that anyone wants to fill unless it's decking you out. So the good Runic cards that most people are going to play are like borderline Striker cards that you can play if you have a card in your main monster zone or not. So that's kind of how I viewed it when I saw it, but I didn't just want to write it off as that. I wanted to give it a chance and see what it would do and test the cards myself. And I'm not going to lie, Runic is really nice with it. Like, it's one of those decks where it's really hard to hand trap too, because like, it doesn't have to be hand trapped if it doesn't want to be. It dodges Valor extremely well. I think cards like Ash are going to be your best bet. Like Ash and Bell, I think, are like the best hand traps against this deck. Ogre doesn't matter. Gamma is okay. It's okay. Like, cards like Gamma and Valor matter if like they need to get to field spell, but if they don't really make that much of an impact. And cards like Pro and Bell and Ash are okay. Like, there's not a lot of hand traps that work against this deck, I'm not gonna lie. Like, Shifter works against almost every deck, so that's like one of the safest decks. Like, it's one of the safest cards, but like, it's just really not easy to hand trap this deck. And then the Mystic Mind, you have to out it in a very specific way. You have to banish that hoe. You can't target it, you can't destroy it. You like, well, not even all the time. You can't even always banish that hoe, because if they got that level 3, that one chick, bro, I don't know what you're supposed to do. Like, it's kind of hard, bro. But also, it's like stuff that can be telegraphed, and then there's stuff that cannot be telegraphed. So the Runic player is not always going to have 20/20 hindsight and just be like, I know he has, the only way he's going to out is to target, so I'm going to put my level 3 up. You know, but just be careful, bro, because this deck is really annoying, and nobody likes playing against it. And it's bonkers going first, and it's bonkers going second. It's hard to hand trap, and it breaks boards the long way. So, no cap, it's definitely tier 1.5. Like, it's definitely it's a real deck. It's not like a meme. It's not like it's all hype. It really is a deck. Like Labyrinth and Runic actually came out and started clapping cheeks out the woodworks, and people did not expect it. They thought it was just gonna be a joke. Next up, I'm gonna talk about Despia, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm really gonna put Despia in tier 1.5. I had thought about it for a while to put it in tier 2 before I made this video, because this is my second take. Because the first one, the audio got messed up. But bro, Despia is really, really crazy, bro. It's so nice. Like, hand traps that actually matter against this deck are like Ash, Bell, and Crow. Veiler can be dodged, Imperm can be dodged because you can activate certain things in draw phase, and then you have Branded and Red to dodge targeting. You have cards like Gamma that can be okay, and the fact that this deck doesn't really have to play into Nib like ever, that Lancia doesn't really do anything, Droll doesn't really do anything, and then it also can play under Shifter. You can even sideboard into Shifter with this deck. Like, I've literally shifted this deck with Flu, and I still got Masqueraded, and it was Masquerades, it was double Masquerade and something else. I forgot, but he was able to not only like play on my turn, but like on his turn he still kept playing, and I was like, what the heck, bro? And then I've seen Despia players actually sideboard in the Shifter because it hurts their opponent more than it hurts them. Like, it's not a stifling card against this deck. It like imposes certain hindrances on the engine, like the functionality. Like, some of your cards don't work, but not all of your cards don't work. Only some of them. So that's just kind of bonkers that the 3 best lingering... And when I talk about lingering effects, bro, it's like... Lingering effects to me are better than hand traps. I mean, they're better than like any interruptions. They're better. Like, if you said stacks, would you rather have Appaloosa plus 2 Omni Negates, a counter trap, and a floodgate? Would you rather have those, or would you just rather have one turn skip? I would pick the turn skip every time because there's nothing your opponent can do about it. Floodgates can be answered. Like, if it's on the field, it can be removed by some form of spot removal. Something can stop it, right? But if a lingering effect resolves, there's nothing you can do about it. And this deck can play under all of the 3 best lingering hand traps. Shifter, Droll, and Lancia. It can play through and under all. It can play past Nibiru, and it doesn't have to play into Nibiru. It's Ash is like the strongest hand trap, and that's only speaking arguably if they need Fusion to play. They don't always need Fusion to play. And that's also excluding the fact that this deck can play Gamma and it can play Crossout. My list plays Gamma, Crossout, and Talents, and Called By in my Despia list, personally. And also, this deck can Scythe Lock. It's one of the few decks that can actually Scythe Lock post BANLIST, and that's like a big deal. It's like okay, it's Scythe Lock. You know, everybody knows about it, so it seems underwhelming when you just look at it on pen and paper. It's like, oh, Scythe Lock, great, another Scythe Lock deck. But then it's like, why do you feel that way? Something made you feel that way, bro. You obviously have your feelings hurt. Scythe obviously made you feel some type of way for a reason. It's a turn skip. It's a lingering effect. You can Scythe block somebody, and then now all of a sudden your turn 1 Despia board just became better than Double Toad with Smashers and a Carrot. You know what I mean? It became better than Double Toad with Smashers, a Carrot, and another Omni Negate, and 2 more hand traps because your opponent can't play. And all those negates are serving a similar function. They're just there to make sure that your opponent can't play so that you can play so you can kill them. Well, that's what Scythe does, just in a simplified way. So it's like the deck has access to one of the best turn skips in the game, and it can play under, around, and sometimes even through Scythe because of how its engine works, especially with quick plays like Super Poly, Branded in Red, and Branded Opening. And it also doesn't lose to any of the turn skip lingering effect hand traps, and it plays through interruptions so well. It breaks boards so well with pure engine, and its turn 1 boards are phenomenal. Cream of the crop, Guardian Chimera, bro, Masquerade, double it up, bro. Oh my gosh, and Mirror Jade is so broken. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this deck didn't get touched. Like, it's baffling. I think this deck is one of the best decks, like, period. Period, poo. Like, there's literally nothing you could tell me. Like, oh my god. And then you can summon Dragoon and Linda and DPE. Like, you can mix it up, bro. You can really get spicy if you want to. If you're just picky and you're like, I want to play normal Despia, then you don't have to play normal Despia. Too many variants, bro. You could even play Despia tier or just Branded tier and throw some fusions in that hole. But still, Despia is just so strong. It really is. I truly believe that turn skips are literally better than like any form of interruption. And the second best is probably floodgates. And then the third best is like negates, like Boiled Savage and Floor and all that. I think floodgates and turn skips, like lingering effects, are better than any type of interruption. There's nobody that could change my mind, because you're going to lose more to those than you're going to lose to anything else, and I'm going to prove my point. Invoke Dogmatica. Invoke Dogmatica using DPE and the shit all cards. I think that's like the best way to play Invoke Dogmatica. This deck can also play like 15 plus hand traps too, I'm not gonna lie. My Despia list for a while was playing 18 hand traps. I think this deck's just really solid. It's well rounded. It has very little weaknesses, and also it's one of the most forgiving decks on this list because there's not a lot of room for error. It's literally like you have to straight up be incompetent to misplay with this deck, and that is like a very polite way of saying dumb, but I'm not going to say that because it's kind of offensive and some people would take that and stretch that inch into a mile. So I'm just going to say you have to be incompetent to misplay with this deck. It's very good. It's very strong. Its inboards are arguably just as good as any deck. It has its own built-in win conditions. It has its own kind of lingering-esque effects, being like floodgates, like Winda and Kaliga. But then you have like Makaba, you have like Purgatrio, you have all the good Invoke fusions. The Dogmatica cards giving you access to stuff that your deck doesn't have access to. Then you have cards like DPE, you have all the hand traps you can play, and you just have like really good anti-meta hate. You know, it's really, really powerful. It's just such a good deck. I don't have to talk a lot about it because it's one of the older format decks like Dragon Link, which I'm going to bring up next. I'm not going to lie, if we're talking about like Brave, Dragon Link, like Brave is going up here. It's like Brave is going up here. I'm not going to lie. Brave is like going up here because it's not like a deck, it's like an engine, but if it was in a tier, it would be a tier 1 engine. But Brave is also being played in Dragon Link right now, and it's the boards are like the cream of the crop. The follow-up is like kind of atrocious, and it's stanky legging. Like, bro, it's really stanky legging on the opposition sometimes. Like, bro, like literally, it's some of these decks are tier 2, but they're so good. They're so hard to hand trap. Like, there's times where you see Dragon Link cutting up, and they didn't play through 2 hand. This is one of the decks too that can play past Nib if they set up still and they're not dumb. I mean, they're not. Ooh, I need to check myself. And they're not incompetent. They set up still and they're not incompetent. They can play past Nib. And it's actually obnoxious what this deck's going to be doing when Darkwing Blast comes out in about 3 weeks, which I'm going to be updating tiers because those cards are going to shake things up. Dragon Link's going to be even more of a monster than it already is. But it's been a monster for a while. It's been a powerhouse for a while. If it wasn't going to die 2 years ago, if it wasn't going to die 2 years before that, what makes you think it's going to die now? It's just a ghost from the past. You know, pun intended. It's always going to pop up. And it's always going to get results. It can have the lowest representation in the room and still have some of the best results. Dragon Link always naturally does good wherever it's at for many very good reasons. So what we'll talk about next is going to be the most obvious tier 1 deck. We're going to start with Sprite, and then we're going to move the Live Twins with it, because Live Twins and Brave are both engines that are played in Sprite. I just think Sprite is so good. Like, I'm not going to lie, sometimes it's flat, like I was saying, and it's like 7-up, but bro, it's still nice. Like, this deck is still so nice, bro. It's just so good. Like, I like this deck a lot. I personally like playing this more than Tier, because Tier's getting more hate. You know, there's more floodgates, there's more anti-Tier cards and more anti-Tier hate than there is like anti-Sprite stuff. You know, people are less worried about Sprites than they are worried about Tier. I mean, these are the decks. These two decks, which Tier is obviously better than Sprite, it's literally just, it's a given. These decks, there was not going to be a debate on whether or not these were going to be Tier 1, you know. But the thing is, because these are new and because they are good, they are Tier 1 decks, these drastically take away from the representation of other decks. So representation for decks that are not these two has been on a decline, and they're continually diminishing. You know, so these decks, some people might not even think these are tier anything because they're not being seen, they're not being played that much, because these are played so excessively to the point that it's literally, if it's not Sprite, it's Tier, and if it's not Tier, it's Sprite. Like, these decks are so overwhelmingly represented that their results come naturally just by default. Because like if you have a regionals where Tier and Sprite are the only decks being played, then obviously Tier and Sprite are gonna top. Like, you gotta think about it, bro. If I go to, I've said this before in a joking way, but it's serious. If I go to YCS and the top cut is 32 Battery Man players, what do you think is gonna top? Battery Man's, like, bro. And that's why it's like the results for these are a little diluted. I'm not gonna lie, it's not always what it looks like on the surface, but representation is the hugest influential kind of determining factor for these, because the results are already proven. They're already like, there's no disposition against these decks. You can't really say a lot of bad stuff. There's not a lot of bad things that can be said. With Tier, what I like more about Tier is the diversity in like the deck building process and the aspect that different variants have different weaknesses, and with different weaknesses sometimes come strengths that the deck didn't already have, and also giving it kind of like a stronger membrane to contend with stuff that you already know is going to give the Tier engine a hard time. So it's really cool that I could play, like, for example, Danger Tier, and I could struggle against Dweller, and then I come back the same day playing Sprite Tier, and all of a sudden I'm not struggling against Dweller as much because the engine that I decided to play in my tiers now does not care about the grave. So I do believe that because this deck is so diverse and there's so many different ways to build it, that it makes it even more of a sought after and a desirable tier 1 contender, because the composition of how you can build this deck and just truly kind of its generic aspects being that there's too many different things you can mesh in this one deck, bro. Like, it's too much. Like, you could play Bysteads in these hoes. It's a little bit too much, to the point that you can build it to where it doesn't really lose to the same cards that it was losing to before, and that's a really big deal. And the fact that there's a lot of room for non-engine makes these even better decks than some of the other decks on this list, because even the other tier 2s, tier 1s we put up here are not going to have the same space. Sprite can like, my Sprite list literally plays 18 hand traps in a 43 card list. I could just make it 15 and call it 40. The same with Tier. You could play like 20 non-engine cards in this deck. Most of the splashability comes from the fact that you have the room to do so. You could play PTSD, bro, and literally give people the same thing. Like, it's just that crazy of a deck that I can take what my deck struggles with the most and then splash in 2 to 3 compact engines that grant me strengths that I didn't have and also don't have the same weaknesses that my deck had, which gives me coverage, which allows me to have more comfort and fluency in the terms of my side decking, the ratios, and it's just more easy breezy and less stressful to deal with. There's a lot more detriments that you can impose on your opponent now than they can impose on you, simply because of the variance now, bro. This is the best deck for those reasons and many more. It can play through, these decks can play through more high impact than most decks. This deck can play past nib to an extent. If you're smart and you let them resolve all their tier effects and then you nib them, it's cool. But you also let them get too much advantage on you. So if you let them one-up you to that regard, it's kind of crazy. And this deck also can stop nib with this new fusion. Sprite can set up a negate or two before nib can be used, but also sometimes it can play past nib. And also, Branded Despia is one of the decks. This is like the only deck that really doesn't... This and the purple decks and Invoke Dogmatica are like the only decks that don't like have to play the nib ever if they don't want to. So these three are kind of unique in that regard. But yeah, these are like the best decks for a reason. These are really, really strong. They're tried and true. Their results are crazy. I like... Sprite's nice, and I just like Sprite because there's less hatred towards it. And like the turn one, like... Eradicator Dweller boards are not really going to do that much to you because you don't care about Dweller, and my variant of Sprite plays 7 spells, so it's like, come on, bro, I don't even play Mystic Mind. Like, what are you doing? Sword Soul is going to be next, and this is going to go in the upper echelon of tier 2. I forgot to put Labyrinth and Eldritch here because they definitely belong there. Sword Soul, I think, even though I like Dragon Link and Invoke Dogmatica better, I think Sword Soul is just better as a deck. These decks also, need I mind you, even though they're not represented as highly, their results speak for themselves, and these are never gotten bad. Like, they've always been good. These decks are just so overwhelming. Their presence is so great that, like I said, the representation on everything else just diminishes, and you just... It's like cricket. Every time you even ask Has Sword Soul done anything? Crickets. You ask about Despia, you ask about Dragon Link, you ask about Invoke Dogmatica, it's like crickets. And then you have like those two guys that, if you guys have seen Jimmy Neutron and you remember when Sheen finally got smart, you have those two guys and their heads literally are shaped like that, bro. And they're the only ones playing Sword Soul. But they're beasts. Like, they're freaking baby Albert Einsteins playing Sword Soul all the way to the top cut, beating everything, all the opposition, bro. Like, he's literally flossing on the ops. And so Sword Soul is crazy because it has numerous different win conditions. It's diverse. You can build it in different ways. But it contends with the opposition in so many different ways. It has a lot of tools. It has great utility. And utility, to me, sometimes outweighs power. Even though to some people power matters more, I feel like utility and consistency are so much more alluring to me. You know, that to me, if you want to compel me into playing a deck, the only way you're going to compel me to play a deck is if it has consistency and utility through the wazoo. I don't care how powerful it is. I care more about those things because power can easily be outweighed by consistency. And also utility can vastly outperform power because utility gives you coverage in regards to multiple different matchups and also allows you to contend with things that other decks cannot. Yes, some of these decks have Ultimistic Mind. I should have been mentioning that too. Like, Dragon Link has hiding if they're playing it, and if not, when the new Bicep cards come out, they have the trap. Invoke Dogmatica doesn't have an engine out, but every deck, if it doesn't have an engine out, it should be playing it out. Both these engines have outs. This engine does not. This engine does. Sword Souls don't really, if they're not, you know, again, if they're not incompetent, they're not going to put a second card on the field, so you're just going to lose if you don't play an out. Sprites have an out, and tiers most of the time have an out, whether they're incorporating sprite cards or other stuff. This deck, you just can't Mystic Mind the Mystic Mind deck. Despia does not have an out. But yeah, Sword Soul is just really strong. It requires very little to go off, and it also doesn't really have to respect a lot of stuff. And that's another thing that makes this deck kind of crazy. It doesn't really have to respect Ash. It only really has to respect Nibiru, and it has to respect Gamma. It doesn't really have to respect Imperm or Valor because those can be dodged with some of its in-archetype specific cards. It can chain block the Ash. It doesn't have to respect Ogre. It does not have to respect DD Crow or Ghost Spell whatsoever. And when you really consider the fact that some decks are playing Bell, DD Crow, and Ash, and Imperm as like their only hand traps, you got to consider how much more appealing Sword Soul would be, comparatively speaking, when not only is it already naturally so good at playing through hand traps, but most of the hand traps that are being played don't work against your deck. So that's another thing. The hand traps that are good against Tier and like that are good against Sprite are not really that good against Sword Soul. They're not really that good against Dragon Link. They're okay, you know, against some of these other decks, but they're amazing against these decks. So Sword Soul is just phenomenal. I really think Chao Feng is one of those cards that makes this deck able to just kind of go right here at any given time. If the best decks are light attribute decks, then this deck is right here. Because Chao Feng go crazy against Exo Sisters, and Chao Feng go crazy against Drytron. Pure Punk, I'm not going to lie, I'm going to put it right here. Actually, I am going to give it the cake over Invoke Dogmatica. Pure Punk is like mad consistent. It's not going to play through the most hand traps. Like, I feel like the tier 2 decks can consistently play through 2 low impacts and sometimes a high impact plus a low impact, like Nib plus anything. These decks can sometimes play through it. I think Invoke Dogmatica plays through it like the best because a lot of the times it A, doesn't play in a Nib, and B, if it does, it's like, oh, I activate Nadir Servant then, bro. And you just cry. But I think like Punk, its value also comes from it, like Sword Soul, Dragon Link, and Invoke Dogmatica has so much room for non-engine that even though these decks might not be that crazy with breaking boards, which some of them actually kind of are low-key cracked with navigating through fully established boards, it makes up for that and mitigates it through the fact that when it comes to the deck building process and what you can put inside of your Punk deck is upwards of 15 to 20 going second cards. That's excluding the fact that your engine is actually gas enough to play through a decent amount of interruptions itself. Your deck's very consistent. Hulk and Chaos Ruler being banned hurt this deck more than any other deck on this list, but it doesn't change really that the deck is still good. It doesn't really just, oh, the deck's dead. People are very quick to say that too. They assume and then they jump to a conclusion after they assume. They ride their assumption like a horse, bro, and then it turns into a fact. So now it's like a black fiery horse and they have no head on their shoulders. And now it's just a conclusion that they've made that, oh, it's dead because of such and such. And then they hear somebody else say it's not dead. Then they go around saying it's not dead. And it's like, come on, bro. But Punk, I think, is a great deck. It's not in the worst spot, but it's not in the best. And I don't know enough about this deck to kind of value the statistics and the pros and cons more. But from what I've seen, from what I've heard, and from what I know, this is where I would place it. Exo Sisters, I feel, is just like, oh my god, bro. Like, if Exo Sisters if this deck is having its way in regards to the matchups, like if Exo Sisters is constantly being set up against Tier and Branded and Invoke Dogmatica and like other decks like that, then Exo Sisters is like right here, bro. Cause like, bro, I hate playing against this deck too. Like, this deck and Flunders, like, Flunders actually are here. I'm not gonna lie, that's a spoiler, I guess. But Flunders are actually here. But like this deck, Flunder and Runic, I hate playing against these decks, but I love playing them, bro. Like, oh my gosh, bro, I just feed off the tears, bro. Like, it's literally hydration for me. Like, oh, I need all the salty tears coming my way. Like, this deck, if it is allowed to play, nobody else is, bro. That's how I feel about this. That's how, I'm not gonna lie. Like, if this remains a tier element format, this deck should be like right here. But I'm not gonna lie, the reason why it's here is what I'm about to say next. It is not that good going second at all. Its engine, the hand traps that matter are like Ash. It actually can set up interruption through Nibiru too, which is cool. It can turn Nibiru off, which is amazing. You have like Ash, Gamma, Imperm, and Veiler. Hand traps that don't really matter that might actually hurt sometimes, like Crow. And then like Ghost Spell and Ghost Ogre just doesn't work. But like Nib, Gamma, Ash, Imperm, Veiler are all actually pretty decent. Nib is like the thing that like this deck, if you only have Nib, this deck might not even let you use Nib against it, which is actually a kind of cool and unique thing, that this is one of those decks that can actually just say no to a specific card. But also at the same time, it's just not going to be breaking boards, because hand traps are not the only thing you're contending with when you're going second. When you're navigating through a board, you're most of the time navigating through what's known, and the known interruptions are what you are. They're staring down your face and they're breathing down your neck, bro. Like, they're literally, you can see them. And there's no way Exo Sisters breaking these boards with pure engine, not on a best, not on its worst day. But it makes up for the fact of that with, like, again, some of these other decks having a good membrane, being your space for non-engine is vast and deep enough that you can squeeze in and wedge in enough non-engine to make up for the fact that your deck is not powerful enough to just break boards with pure engine. It's not always going to do it, but it's not always going to be incapable of doing it. But I would give it like a 70-30 on 70%. Your Exo Sister cards are not enough. 30%, hey, I'm playing a fair deck, it's enough. But being able to play Shifter and 9 other hand traps, plus being able to play cards like Mystic Mine, really give this deck and Sword Soul and Dragon Link and Invoke Dogmatica and Despia and like all of these other lower tier decks, the non-engine helps them to contend even more. They're already good by themselves, but non-engine is always going to cover grounds. That's what I do with my non-engine. Cover grounds, being, you know what your deck's weak against, make up for it, mitigate it as much as you can. But when this deck is allowed to play, bro, I just gotta say it again, nobody's playing. Like, oh my god. Like, speaking of nobody's playing, oh my god. Like, if it ain't the king of you ain't doing jack squat, but I am. Like, if it ain't the king of tomfoolery, nonchalant nonsense town, bro. If it ain't the I'm on it and you not, bro. Like, oh my goodness, bro. This deck is literally gonna pull up on a 4-wheeler and serve you a quarter pound, bro. Like, Flunder is so cracked. It's absolute nonsense. This deck is like more consistent than Exo Sisters, and it also plays through hand traps more than... This deck is so goated for how it plays through interruptions if you open cracked. Like, if you open Map, Advent, and freaking Samork, you're playing through everything! This deck can literally Shifter cuts off Joel and Valor. You can play around Ash by always chain blocking with cards like Map and cards like Samorg. You can chain block Gamma with cards like Map, Samorg, and also you could stop Gamma and Nibiru on your 3rd or your 5th summon with Barrier Statue. And you can dodge Valor and Imperm with Book of Moon and Advent. I've listed every hand trap that can possibly be used that's not Lancia. This deck can play through, mitigate, prevent, resist the rest. This deck can do all of it. The only hand trap that it can't really deal with is actually Lancia, but you have Call By, and you also have Cross Out, and you also have the fact that Lancia is literally seeing 0 play. It's not good against this, not good against this, not good against this, not good against this, not good against this. It's not good against anything except this deck and sometimes this deck. So hence, the deck's only weakness that it can't mitigate doesn't matter, bro. Like, oh, I have Drool. You better hope they don't have Shifter. Even if they don't open it, it's the fact that the few hand traps that it can't really beat, well, it can't consistently outplay or counterplay are Droll and Lancia. Droll can be taken care of, and Lancia doesn't exist right now. So this deck goes crazy. Going second, breaking board, freaking Map, freaking wins, freaking Advent, freaking Emperor Penguin, bro. Like, oh my god, I hate this deck, and I love it at the same time. This deck will give people aneurysms, bro. Like, this deck outperforms these decks when it's allowed to play. This is the deck that you cannot allow to play. Out of every deck on this list, you cannot allow this deck to play, because this deck, more than any deck, will outgrind you the most, will have the strongest follow-up, will have the most oppression. Its board presence is pure pressure. Heaping amounts. It is gravity incarnate. It is you're playing Pokemon, and a rock type Pokemon just activated magnitude times 10. Instant KO, bro. It is Hyper Beam, Solar Beam personified, coming from Arceus' freaking Jewel, bro. Okay? It is absolutely tier 1. It's consistent, it's reliable, it's dependable, it's powerful. Double Barrier Statue. Its combos mitigate Dark Ruler naturally. You have Omni Negates, you have win conditions through Barrier Statue, you have win conditions through Impin, win conditions through Avion, win conditions through Mega Monarch, Rise of the Mana Monarch, Shifter. Your actual engine just outperforming other engines is a win condition. And then we factor in... Wait. Were we done? We said Avion, we said Impin, we said Barrier Statue, we have Harpies Featherstorm, we had all the big birds, we had Searchable DD Crows, and then the fact that, like, when the engine, it just goes, it's just gone, bro, with the win. Like, this is like that... Like, you hear the car start and you look out the window and it's already on the freeway, and it's like, bro, I literally just heard the car start. How? Like, that's Flunder. It's so good. It's so oppressive. And if it opens broken, this deck's broken makes Tears broken look like shambles. This deck broken is glass that got ran through a paper shredder, which is impossible. And then Tears broken is like, oops, I dropped my glass. But Mathmech is like a tier 2 deck, but I think it's like the weakest tier 2 deck. And not because it's a bad deck, because it just... I really feel like out of all the decks that do stuff, it just doesn't do enough. I feel like the only way this deck is crazy is if it's searching a Floodgate turn 1 plus your Super Factorial with hand traps. It's not breaking boards as incredibly well as most decks, but it is way better going second than it's given credit to. It's also extremely consistent, and we cannot downplay the fact that it utilizes all of the utility in the toolbox that the Cyburst generic cards have to offer. Generic-esque being, if it's Cyburst, it can play it. And there's a lot of great Cyburst support that can really offer this deck a stronger membrane than it already has. So So there's a resiliency that doesn't always exist, and that's simply because it wasn't built properly. So it's not to downplay this deck or discredit what it can do or its capabilities in any way, shape, or form, but it's to simply state that Mathmech is not really that good because I just really haven't seen good builds on it, and I haven't seen good players playing it. But if an incredible player pilots this deck, it can easily be here. I would never really say it's powerful enough to be tier 1 unless tier was not tier 1, you know, because I feel like its best board is kind of just lunch meat for tier. But I'm not going to downplay it. You know, it plays through a decent amount of hand traps. It's really powerful. It can play a lot of hand traps. It's very consistent. It's very resilient. It doesn't grind the best. It has an archetype specific optimistic mind. But it's also not really bad at all. It's just like really, it's the lowest tier 2. And I'm not going to lie, Drytron is my last tier 1 deck of choice. Oh my god. Oh my god. My battery, baby! But yeah, Drytron's like the last tier 1 deck. I feel like Barrier Statue 2.0 in the form of Vanity's Ruler plus Counter Trap plus Follow Up is kind of goated. This deck has more variants than you take all these decks, every variant they have, put it all together on a calculator. That number multiply it by 2, and Drytron still probably has more variants than that. FTKs, Omni Negate, Spot Removal, Blossom, got all of it, bro. Like, this deck took Gotta Catch 'em All to a whole nother level. It's took Gotta Catch 'em All and flipped it to I gotta keep them all because I already been had it, bro. Like, Drytron has everything that you would want out of a combo deck except space. That's it. I think that's the biggest weakness this deck has. It just doesn't have enough space for non-engine, for tech cards. Its engine is such a, like, it's kind of sometimes a burden. It's such a burden because you need so many cards in the deck for it to just function properly that it takes away from the depth and magnitude of it having that coverage that it needs a lot of the time. So it has the least room for engine, but its engine makes up for that most of the time because its engine does so much more than other decks' engine can that it naturally can just break these boards that Tier and Sprite make. Drytron is one of the very few decks on this list that literally can open 0 go second cards and just stomp. And I mean stomp, I mean it'll make it look like bro, oh my god. It's like, handle my lightweight. Alright bro, I got you. Like literally bro, Drytron's so good going second and first. Going first is just FTK. It can literally actually FTK you too, but it's like it's an FTK going first. Whether it's floodgating you, whether it's setting up multiple negates, whether it's putting up Dweller, Appaloosa, Baron with follow-up, whether it's like getting Beatrice, dumping something crazy like Genome or Zombie World, or just it's so flexible. This deck is kind of out of nowhere. It has so many different ways to maneuver and set up its turn 1 boards. Navigating going second is absolutely phenomenal. It's a really good deck. It's very powerful. It's tried and true. Its results speak for themselves. And it also is just getting stronger, bro. Like, it's really just, it's on the rise right now. And it's just really hard to stop this deck. It really is. It has that snowballing factor of, like, Flunder, but it's more of a stability and a follow-up than a snowball because it's just going to do the same thing every turn. So it's also one of those decks that its crackback is kind of sometimes more broken than its turn 1 setup. So this is my tier list. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Thank you guys so much for watching this tier list. God bless you. Make good choices. Don't hurt your brain cells. I really wouldn't sleep on this. This is not a fluke. This is not it's overhyped. No, bro. This is like really what it is. It's really that good. Matter of fact, I don't even gotta do all that. I could just put my baby on the charger. Like, what am I doing, bro? There we go. Woo! Speaking of juice, Drytron got that juice too, bro. You guys gotta check out my agent variant that I still haven't shown y'all. Like, oh my gosh, bro. It's kind of crazy, like, what you can do with this deck. This deck has, like, the most flexibility. Alpha Zeta can do more things. There's more Alpha Zeta combos than there's, like, combos that exist for, I think, like, all of these decks. Like, every Sword Soul combo, every Tier combo. Like, there's more Alpha Zeta than I've ever seen any kind of combos for any other deck, like, ever. And Alpha Zeta kind of taps into, like, an atmosphere or a stratosphere of its own where it can just tap into every archetype that you can think of, almost. It can do, like, Alpha Zeta can do Sprite, Tier stuff. Alpha Zeta, it only can't do that because, you know, it can actually search your burden and normal it, but you have to special summon to do it. Alpha Zeta can't access Runic stuff. Well, actually, you can, like, via Griffin and Beatrice and stuff.
Alpha Zeta can access branded stuff. Alpha Zeta can also access Sword Soul stuff. It can access Dragon Link stuff. It can access Punk stuff. It cannot access Invoke Dogmatic. No, actually it can. It can. Alpha Zeta is just kind of just ridiculous. So even if it's not the best deck, it's the fact that it, like Tier, has so many different variants and ways to play it that it goes again. When you guys heard all the statements I made about this deck that were so bold, right? What was aforementioned also correlates to what I'm talking about right now. This deck is pure gas. This deck is an absolute monster, bruh. It is a monster. But again, thank you guys so much, and deuces as well, baby. I'm out.